Thank you everyone for joining for the session. And since you are aware, this is a series of webinar we have organized with SUSE. And today we are going to discuss upon the SUSE storage, the SUSE Enterprise Storage. So Anup, we have our iValue team, and we also have our partners on this session. Okay, and you can take it up from here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining in. I understand working through a lockdown and working from home is new to some of us, and we are facing those challenges and we are working through it. So I appreciate everybody's time and being here for this session. Now, for this session, we would be looking at the queries and question and answers at the end of the session. So if you look at the control panel, you have an option where there is a questions tab where you can type in the questions that you have. I will address them at the end of the session. Or at the end of the session, you can also have an option to raise a hand. And then I'll one by one unmute people who have raised a hand and listen to their queries and answer it to them. So let's try to go through the session and then let's look at the question and answers in the end. So SUSE Enterprise Storage, today's session is the second session in this series. The main intention for this next 60 minutes is to give you a fair amount of idea about what SUSE Enterprise Storage is, what type of requirements it can address, and what type of feature sets can we expect out of it. When you look at the current storage industry, I'm sure being part of iValue, being part of the tier 1, tier 2 partners, you have a good amount of experience about storage industry and the storage requirements across the market. So I'm starting this session with an assumption that every one of us who is here knows what do you mean by an enterprise storage system to an extent about what does it do. I'm not expecting you to be aware or understand how does it work or how is it architected. That's out of the scope for today's session. The understanding expected before we start with the session is what an enterprise storage does for our customer or what is the role it plays in a data center. Now, when we talk about an enterprise storage, almost 99% of us would go back to a traditional storage system. What do you mean by a traditional storage system? Is an appliance which is built by one particular vendor. It runs a firmware or a software which is again created and owned by that particular vendor. And it's a vendor locked in system. So all the upgrades, all the features, all the software updates coming in are dependent on that particular storage vendor. Now, all the traditional storage systems have been and will continue to be the core component of every single data center across the globe. They are this single data store where all applications which are contributing to business are storing their data and making sure that it is safe there. In the past couple of years, the software-defined storage has started picking up its own grounds. It has started creating its own space in an enterprise storage market. I'm sure many of us would have a first-hand knowledge and experience on what is a software-defined storage. In interest of everyone here, if I try to quickly define what is a software-defined storage, software-defined storage is a combination or a group of different softwares which enable the user to create an enterprise-grade storage out of any hardware. Now, when I say any hardware, many of the software-defined storages still try to stitch it to their own proprietary hardware. So even when a customer moves away from a traditional storage he still gets locked into a single vendor. Now, apart from that, there are also other software-defined storages that we look at and how are they better. So let's come back to the traditional storage. And let's try to address when we have a traditional storage systems which are proven and which are such an integral part of data centers, why do we need a software-defined storage in the first place? So if you look at the current scenarios of the lockdowns, of the current requirements, and when the businesses start coming back to business, they would want to quickly ramp up their operations and try to meet the customer's requirement. Now, the first and foremost thing that you need in such scenarios is an ability to scale faster to meet the new business requirements. Unfortunately, because of the traditional storage's rigidity and being locked to a single vendor, they start facing issues when you expect them to meet the new requirements. So that flexibility or agility starts becoming a challenge. For every end customer that we address to has somewhere felt it and experienced it in their own data centers, that when the business demands my storage to go beyond what it is currently doing, somehow the traditional storage cannot meet it. There are a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost is for the costs which are attached, or the cost component which is attached to a traditional storage system, are pretty steep. The prime reason for that is because anything and everything to do with a traditional storage is controlled by a single vendor who owns that storage system. So when you're talking about deploying a traditional storage, when you're talking about adding further functionality to it, or when you're talking about scaling it further to meet the new requirements, the costs and the time required to achieve it are pretty high. When you look at the OpEx part, when you look at managing those storages, the skill set required, the training required, and the people required to manage it also is a significant cost to an enterprise. And even when an enterprise affords to, or it is able to meet all this, the amount of time that is required to onboard a new feature or to bring in the additional upgrades, the time runs in multiple weeks, where some enterprises end up losing their patience or completely shelving off the entire opportunity that they were working on. Apart from the costs and missed timelines, the enterprise storage systems also are pretty complex for a single user or a single enterprise to work on. They always require a specific amount of skilled IT guys to monitor it and to work onto it. They are the best platform for all your real-time data and three-dimensional database kind of data. But when you talk about such data sets growing rapidly with the business, enterprise storage systems most of the times are not able to keep up with the data growth. And over the period of time, being a single appliance, they tend to age faster and their performance starts going down. Now, apart from the inherent drawbacks of an enterprise storage, there are still enterprises who are using it, and there is a valid reason for that. Because when you look at a data center, there are certain data sets which are bound to get a particular type of IO or latency kind of a treatment, which only an enterprise storage can give. That is for the traditional workloads. When you look at the new age workloads, when your enterprise is trying to go for a containerization, it is going for an Openstack, or it is looking for a flexible S3 kind of a cloud storage to be created, then the enterprise storage starts showing a limit in which they cannot support such systems. In such scenarios, the end customers start looking for options beyond a traditional storage system. That is the perfect time, or that is the perfect scenario where you talk about a software-defined storage strategy. So before I talk about software-defined strategy, let me make one thing clear. Right now, when we talk about a software-defined storage, it does not intend to replace the traditional storage system. So a traditional storage system, what you talk about, one big enterprise grade appliance, which you see in data center, that stays. And the software defined storage plans to complement it in terms of trying to fill in the gaps and meet the opportunities which a traditional storage cannot. So, and software defined storage plans to work along with a traditional storage system. When you look at a customer and his data, you must be already aware with your current knowledge and experience that data is not of a single type. If you try to structure data, you can easily structure the enterprise data into 4 tiers: tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So what do I mean by these? Tier 0 is the data which is highly critical for the business and requires the best possible performance that the enterprise can provide to. Generally, you would see end customers hosting this data onto the highest possible SSDs and NVMe drives. And business cannot afford even a single second downtime on this data. Below that comes the tier 1. Now, tier 1 is the business critical data which is important to the business. It is larger in size, mainly databases and data sets, which are required for the business to function. Tier 2 is the business support systems like user data or what you call about SharePoints or email exchanges and all that, semi-structured data. And tier 3 is my archival data. The reason I spoke about that is because when you try to fit in a software-defined and the software-defined strategy, it concentrates and mainly targets on the tier 2 and the tier 3 segment. So if I try to classify what data sits into traditional storage and what goes to the software-defined, tier 0, tier 1, by default, host it onto the best possible traditional storage with the highest performance. Tier 2 data, which usually takes space into the production systems, move it out onto a software-defined storage. Tier 3, which is backups, archival, long-term archival copies, definitely move it onto a software-defined storage. So this is how a software-defined storage complements the traditional storage infrastructure. With an introduction of software-defined storage, customers start seeing certain advantages like the software-defined storage is easier to deploy, it is easier to manage, and it is really easy to scale. So when we look at businesses coming out of a lockdown, trying to ramp up, trying to restart the projects that they had to stop because of the lockdown scenarios, when they try to restart those projects, they are going to come back with a sudden requirement to their IT teams for new capacity, for new protocols, or even for certain new shares or cloud tiering requirements. And customers are definitely going to have challenges meeting them using their traditional storage systems. That's where we as a partners, we can be of a help to them. We can, with a software-defined storage, give them an option to meet this scale, to meet these requirements, and to meet the new protocol requirements that the business is pushing at them. Imagine a customer who is not having an object store right now in his data center, gets a requirement from his business to have an object store or a content storage created. If he tries to do that on a traditional storage system, it would be weeks and months before he can have an active content store in his data center. But if you try to do that using software-defined storage, you can roll out an object protocol within minutes. You can add capacity using existing server within minutes. So the comparison between rolling out a new service between a traditional store and a software-defined storage is vast. The difference is huge. Now, as I initially started saying, that when you talk about software-defined storage, it's not a one single type of a storage. There are still certain players who have tried to create a proprietary flavor of a software-defined storage and still trying to push their own software, their own licensing, and their own appliances as a software-defined storage. Now, against that, there are some well-established and non-proprietary software-defined storages. Many of them are open source. And one of the leading open source solution for a software-defined storage is ceph. SUSE Enterprise Storage is a distribution of ceph. So what I mean by a distribution? It is a customized version of ceph which has been created and contributed by SUSE to make it more user-friendly, easier to deploy, and easier to manage. While doing that, with the brand name of SUSE, SUSE gets a guarantee to the end customer that it would be there to support customer right from the design, implementation, and the overall product support for the entire tenure that he subscribed to SUSE. So when I look at the SUSE Enterprise Storage, what does it mean to the customer? So it's a software-defined storage which is based on ceph, and it is fully scalable and resilient storage. So we know what do I mean by scalable. So I can scale 360 degrees. I can scale on capacity, I can scale on processing, I can scale on protocols, whichever way I want, irrespective of each other. Okay. And while I'm doing that, I'm also fully fault tolerant. So I'm resilient for any changes which can happen in an environment to make sure that the customer data is protected at all times. While doing this, SUSE Enterprise Storage also keeps in mind that it is reducing the IT costs which are borne by the end customers. How do we do that? Is going against the proprietary software-defined systems. SUSE Enterprise Storage, being an open source software-defined storage, lets the customer build a software-defined storage instance using any commodity server hardware. So when you're trying to create a SUSE Enterprise Storage instance, we do not restrict or limit what type of server hardware can you use to build it. It can be a new server of any make, model, brand out of the known server vendors, or it can be an existing inventory which is lying idle at a customer's IT data center. Even when you have created an instance and you are trying to scale it further, there are no restrictions in terms of what type of hardware you can mix and match. You can start with a brand A servers today. 2 months down the line, you can add servers from a different OEM altogether, and all of them will work together as a single cluster, maintaining high availability and fault tolerance across all the nodes at the same level. That's the flexibility. With the flexibility, the SUSE Enterprise Storage in ceph is also being created with a level of intelligence where it can keep on optimizing itself. It is a storage system which is always aware of the environment on which it has been deployed and is always maintaining a track of changes which are happening to it. Now, if I try to compare this with traditional storage systems, there's a one simple logic. For a traditional storage system, any change or any upgrade is a special case scenario which needs to be done with a proper planning and a downtime. But when you talk about a SUSE Enterprise Storage or ceph, it is designed with a mindset that the environment is always going to change. That's where for SUSE Enterprise Storage, any change, addition, deletion of protocols, addition, deletion of capacity or resources is a normal scenario. You do not need to take or treat it as a special case or look for a specific downtime for such activities. That's the flexibility. So the storage is always evolving, always optimizing, and always maintaining a level of resiliency for the entire data and all components it has. Now, let's quickly look at how do we achieve that. So as I mentioned that for SUSE Enterprise Storage, we do not require any specific appliances or hardware, and customer is free to use any commodity hardware. So let's quickly look at how do we do that. So what we do is we try to segregate the available server hardware into three roles. The first role is the storage capacity servers. Storage capacity servers are mainly the servers who have a larger capacity of internal drives that they can accommodate. So look at servers which can go up to 32 drives, 50 drives, 68 drives. You can start with even 4 drives, nothing is stopping you. But when you try to classify, it is recommended that you go for servers which can have higher amount of drives. I'll talk about that. Why do we look at higher capacity drives or higher capacity servers as storage capacity servers? So storage capacity servers are the one which will be creating the capacity pool for our software defined storage instance, and they are the ones who would be hosting that capacity. Now, this is the first role for servers. The second role is for monitoring. So monitoring servers are usually the smaller servers which are single CPU, just 2 drives and minimal 32 to 64 GB memory. They are not the data handlers or they are not the data holders. So monitoring servers are never part of the IO path. They are, as the name suggests, are responsible only to keep a track of the operations going on in the storage instance and health of all the components. So monitoring servers for SUSE Enterprise Storage, you always start with 3 and they always stay 3. There is very unlikely need to go beyond 3. So these 3 servers can support capacity up to multiple petabytes and do not need to be scaled irrespective of how many storage capacity servers you have or you are planning to scale to. Now the third group is the gateway servers. Now gateway servers, as the name suggests, are the gateway to the capacity which is stored by the capacity servers. So in a simpler terms, they are the ones who are protocol conversion components. They are the ones where the application request for a data is going to land onto. And gateway servers then convert that into the internal protocols and push that IO request onto storage capacity servers, fetch that data and give it to the hosts. So gateway servers are the one on which you would be deploying your block, file, and object protocols as services. So this is the overall architecture for a ceph storage or for a SUSE Enterprise Storage. When you look at this, the entire architecture is created by pure commodity server hardware. Again, this can be any vendor, any make model, any type of drives, any technology of drives. This can be a new service or this can be existing service. There is no limit. You can start small, you can grow as you want, and you can keep on growing any of these components in any fashion required without having any dependency on the neighboring components. If you look at this diagram, you would see that the gateway servers are able to host all three types of protocols. That means a SUSE Enterprise Storage can cater to your block requirements, what you call about as a SAN storage, can give you file related requirements or like what you call as a NAS, and object store, what you call as a content platform. So one single instance can cater to any and every and all protocols at the same time. So it's a truly unified software-defined storage. Now, going ahead of it, when I create that instance, let's look at what type of feature set does that provide to us. SUSE Enterprise Storage 6 is the current GA version as we speak right now. When I look at the feature sets, I would see that there are certain feature sets which have become like a norm for the storage industry right now. So when you talk about it should be fully redundant, it should be able to give heterogeneous OS access, it should be simple to manage and everything, that all is there. It's an end-to-end HA. It's a self-healing storage. So what I mean by this, that the SUSE Enterprise Storage has an ability to self-heal itself in case of any hardware failure, in terms of any disk failing, or in terms of any entire storage node failing. It maintains the data sanctity and it keeps on serving the data to the customer without losing any data. So using erasure coding, it can recalculate and recreate the data to heal itself and come back to health. It can have a policy-based data placement when you're talking about an object store or an S3 storage. It can also be used for any NAS or file-related policy-based data placements for any specific workloads. It supports stretched cluster when you're talking about having one single storage cluster created across two data centers, which are well connected with each other with sufficient amount of bandwidth. SUSE Enterprise Storage can do that. So you can have some amount of storage servers in data center 1, some of them in data center 2, and they can act like a one single cluster. It also supports data replication. So if you're talking about a DC-DR based asynchronous replication, fully supports that. You can replicate any data across two data centers in terms of protecting the data against a site failure. It can go further detailed into security, provide detailed security to certain application using App Armor APIs. It supports data encryption at rest. If you look at the certain features which are mentioned at the below the list, there is a certain amount of color coding. So all the features which are in green are already GA and included in the current version of SES 6, SUSE Enterprise Storage 6. Features which are mentioned in yellow are available and included in SUSE Enterprise Storage 6 as a tech preview or as a beta. So when I say beta, they are available with a limited support. And in the next version, which is SUSE Enterprise Storage 7, they would become GA features. So the tech preview features for SUSE Enterprise Storage 6 are data encryption for data in flight. That is, I'm talking about maintaining data encryption while the data is moving out of one instance and going to the other instance in case of a DR. Okay, so encrypting data in flight or on the wire. So that is a tech preview feature right now for us. The second feature that you look at tech preview is asynchronous remote data replication. So data replication, DCDR, was initially available only for block data, but in the SES6, we have a preview version where you can replicate all type of data. There's one feature which is mentioned in black, is the data deduplication. So that feature is planned, it's in the part of roadmap, but it is not available in the current version. Being a distributed storage, being a storage which is created completely out of commodity hardware, it is a bit difficult to implement a cluster-wide data deduplication. Still, in the next version, data deduplication is being introduced as a tech preview, and we'll be really happy to look at how customers are adopting to it. While we say that, we have data compression, which is already GA and part of the SUSE Enterprise Storage 6. So for all our partners who are listening to me right now, these feature sets are something that would help us when we are trying to respond to a particular requirement, or mainly in case of RFPs. Now, as we have looked at the feature set, let's look at another important aspect about how these features and how SUSE Enterprise Storage 6 is licensed to end customer. So like the configurations and like the setup, even the subscription or licensing has been simplified as much as possible. So for SUSE Enterprise Storage 6, we have just two types of licensing configuration. First is the base configuration, and second is the expansion. Let's look at the base configuration. Base configuration gives me a license for total 10 nodes. Okay, so as I'm talking nodes, that means SUSE Enterprise Storage is not licensed on capacity. It's a purely node-based license with no restrictions on capacity built out of it. So when I look at the base configuration, it gives me license for 4 storage nodes. So these are the 4 servers which are going to act like my storage nodes. They can be of any make, model, and brand. They can accommodate any number of drives, any type of drive, any capacity, any technology, as long as it's only 4 nodes, my base configuration stays true for it. Beyond that, we have 6 infrastructure nodes. These infrastructure nodes are mainly my monitor nodes, my gateway nodes, and management nodes. So these nodes would be scaled only in case if I'm trying to roll out a new protocol, or if I'm trying to accommodate sudden increase in number of concurrent users. That's where I'll start looking at growing the gateway protocols. Gateway service. The monitoring nodes remain the same. They start with 3, and for 99% of the installations, they would stay 3 for the entire lifetime. There is adequate amount of sizing which is done for calculating how many monitoring nodes are required, and we are here to help you with sizing. So for base configuration, as long as I have 4 storage nodes and 6 infrastructure nodes, base configuration stays valid irrespective of the capacity. Just to give you a gist of what do I mean by 4 storage nodes and the capacities it can address, for a particular vendor that SUSE works with, 4 storage nodes can build up beyond 1 petabyte of protected usable capacity using one single base config license. Now, what happens to customers who want to go beyond this? For a customer who wants to add further storage nodes or wants to add further gateway nodes as part of the infrastructure, they complement the base configuration using expansion packs. So an expansion pack gives us subscription for 1 additional infrastructure node and one additional storage node. So using a single expansion pack, customers can add additional storage nodes at the same time, add further management nodes or gateway nodes to scale their overall instance. Both these subscription licenses are at a fixed price and are node based. They do not consider the amount of capacity being built. They are unlimited capacity licenses. Now, as we have simplified the implementation or creation of a software-defined storage, we have simplified the licensing for it. We have also tried to simplify the way you manage it. So going by the norms, the entire storage system is managed by a single GUI, which is a web-based. This GUI is completely access controlled. It can understand and assign separate privileges to different set of users. So for a customer who is having an IT team, he can decide that out of 20 people, 10 people have an access for a particular protocol and can make changes and manage. He can say out of my IT team, only 3 people have access to object store and can make changes and manage it. This dashboard is called ceph dashboard. It's created and contributed by SUSE engineers to the ceph community, and it has become a default dashboard for all ceph distributions across the globe. Ceph dashboard gives you a single pane of glass view of what is the current health and status of your storage instance. It tells you what is the current performance metrics and how are we doing on the capacity, what is the capacity consumption and what is the free available capacity. This can go further detailed into each protocol level, and it can get into even making changes and trying to monitor and manage your instance using a single tool. Now, as we have seen the features and the way it is licensed and managed, let's look at what are the use cases can we address. So SUSE Enterprise Storage, being a truly unified software-defined storage, becomes a general purpose storage for any and every type of data storage requirements. It has its applications across all different business verticals and fields. So when you look at digital archives for big enterprises or for government, SUSE Enterprise Storage becomes one preferred platform for it. Video surveillances, this is the upcoming requirement for Asia Pacific countries like us. Here, the amount of data which is coming in is huge. The data inflow, new data being created is pretty large. At this point in time, accommodating this data onto a traditional storage or a mid-range storage becomes a costly affair. In such scenarios, having a software-defined storage like SUSE Enterprise Storage lets the customers store and maintain this data onto a commodity server hardware, drastically reducing his CapEx and OpEx for surveillance data. SUSE Enterprise Storage can also act like a long-term archival storage for any data which needs to be maintained for compliance purposes. When you talk about virtual machines or when you talk about the new age containers and OpenStack, containers always required a persistent storage, a storage which does not change. And as the containers have an ability to spawn and again die off on the fly, they also expect the attached storage to have that flexibility. Because of all known reasons, a traditional storage cannot give that agility to a container platform. That's where a ceph storage, a software SUSE Enterprise Storage, is able to help the customer. So any customer who's trying to venture or has already started deploying certain set of his applications onto OpenStack or containerized environment SUSE Enterprise Storage becomes the best fit for his enterprise storage needs. Going beyond the enterprises, when you look at the hospitals or medical applications or partners, they have a need to maintain the partner records, or they have a need to maintain the patient records and X-rays and scanned images under the HIPAA compliances. That data is large, keeps on growing, and it's difficult to maintain it readable for years using the traditional backup methods. In such scenarios, SUSE Enterprise Storage can be an ideal platform for them. Using SUSE Enterprise Storage integrations, all the data can be also stored as worm and locked down as per the compliance requirements. When you talk about video data, or when you talk about media industry data, when you're talking about post-production data which needs to be saved, or digital libraries where data is kept and archived for future references by all the media houses, news agencies, or companies who are working on the post-production, they are always looking for cheaper, less per terabyte cost storage systems which can cater to their requirement. And open source, non-proprietary SUSE Enterprise Storage like software-defined storage becomes the perfect fit for them. So being a flexible storage which can talk in any of the data protocols, SUSE Enterprise Storage can be fit into any and every requirement. So as SUSE partners, you have a reach to end customers, and you have a better view and connectivity with what they need. The SUSE Enterprise Storage is there to help you to meet all of them. Now, while I say that, let's quickly look at what are the key use cases which are easy to apply to or easy to fit for us. So the first use case is using SUSE Enterprise Storage for backup. Every single customer out there has business critical data, has a need to protect it, and is doing so by taking backups. Traditionally, the backups used to be taken on tapes. There is still a good percentage of end customers who are still using tape as their primary backup media. When they are doing that, they are facing challenges in terms of maintaining the tapes, or the costs which are attached to the different tapes and the changing technologies for them. Some of the customers who have understood the tape related drawbacks have moved to a disk-to-disk backup. While they are doing that, unfortunately, they have gone to certain proprietary systems which are quite premium. Some of the systems are an extended version of mid-range traditional storages, or some of them are proprietary appliances which are created for backup only. Now, again, the main challenge with this is the cost. Backup being a tier 3 data, the amount of growth that you see into it is many-fold. So for an X amount of data increasing into the tier 0 or tier 1, the corresponding data increase into tier 3 is usually 4x to 6x. This is mainly because of the multiple copies of data being taken on daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, and they being stored in a non-tweakable format for compliance purposes. So for 1 terabyte of data, customer ends up investing multiple terabytes in terms of tapes or D2D appliance capacities. And D2D appliance capacities are being premium, are difficult or costly to maintain in terms of new features or the capacity expansions. That's where SUSE Enterprise Storage can be of a great help to the customer. So SUSE Enterprise Storage becomes an ideal platform for all your D2D data. And rather than trying to replace tape libraries completely, or rather trying to replace the appliances, for the customers who have already invested into it, SUSE Enterprise Storage sits alongside with them and starts complementing it. So for any data growth which is coming and which is not able to accommodate onto existing tape infrastructure or existing D2D appliance infrastructure, starts going on to SUSE Enterprise Storage. SUSE Enterprise Storage slowly starts looking at the overflow and starts arresting the growth and OPEX related costs that the customer is incurring. Being a commodity server based instance, the OPEX cost or per terabyte cost the customer has to incur in SUSE Enterprise Storage is lowest out of all available options. Now, this is not the only reason why the customer should be looking at SUSE Enterprise Storage for backup. SUSE Enterprise Storage has also gone ahead and created its integrations with all leading backup vendors. So when you look at IBM Spectrum Protect, when you look at Commvault, when you look at Veritas NetBackup, when you look at Veeam, or for that matter, even the Microsoft Data Protect, all these names are dominant backup software players in our market. And SUSE Enterprise Storage has tested integrations with all of them. So when I say integrations, it's like for any of these softwares, when you go to the D2D tab, SUSE Enterprise Storage would be listed in the drop-down menu as a destination. So when a customer chooses that, there is no further integration that needs to be done. All of it is already known to the backup software, as well as all of it is already part of the SUSE Enterprise Storage. So this integration is just a couple of clicks and does not require a trained resource to come and do it for the customer. That's the simplicity. When a customer goes for it, he's immediately able to lower the cost that he's incurring on his tier 3 and archival storage. He's able to get the improved SLAs as compared to his tape architecture because he has all his backup data always available for quick restores. When he's doing that, he is not restricted in terms of scalability. He can scale the SUSE Enterprise Storage using any hardware in any way, shape, or form he wants. And while he's doing that, he also gets the flexibility to meet his compliance and regulatory requirements by creating a worm over a certain section of storage or the entire SUSE Enterprise Storage to meet his business compliance requirements. Now, this is just a single use case. When I look beyond the backup, customers or certain type of customers, mainly into banking or government, has a strong need to have a write protected data. That is achieved using SUSE's integration with ICAS Eternity. So Eternity is a third-party software vendor which has its solution called ICAS. With a combination of Eternity, ICAS, and SUSE Enterprise Storage, we can create a compliance and regulatory aware worm storage, write once, read many. And Eternity comes with its plethora of integrations with all known and leading applications which the end customers use across the globe. So what do I mean by that? When a customer is using Eternity ICAS combination, ICAS has its pre-created policies for all known applications, for all known compliances. So when a customer chooses HIPAA compliance, ICAS is already aware what does HIPAA compliance require in terms of how the data needs to be stored and how much of time. And those policies are set onto data and pushed onto SUSE Enterprise Storage, which completely obeys it and implements them. That's how the data is write protected and stored as per the requirement for your regulatory needs. Now, apart from backup, the new age requirements, as I said, for containers and Openstack Cloud also becomes a prominent use case for us. So for all the end customers in your own respective domains who have invested into OpenStack or are using OpenStack in a certain percentage as part of their business workload, SUSE Enterprise Storage becomes a best fit for them. So rather than hosting the OpenStack data onto a traditional storage, the ceph storage is able to meet their requirements better because ceph and OpenStack have a native integration. So a ceph RBD or a ceph block is directly inbuilt integrated with OpenStack. So SUSE Enterprise Storage being a distribution of ceph, the integration stays true for SUSE Enterprise Storage also. So for any distribution or any flavor of OpenStack, SUSE Enterprise Storage can natively integrate it with and start providing block access to the OpenStack infrastructure. When you look at the HPC environment, I'm sure we have a handful of customers who are into research or who are into environments which they have created their high performance computing grids. Such customers always have a persistent worry about accommodating the data which has been already churned. So in HPC environments or large Hadoop type of environments, which are mainly used for churning or doing an analytical work onto a data, the output is of two types. There is a small fraction of the data which is relevant for the business, and there's a large chunk of data which is processed data which is yet to be correlated but needs to be saved. That data cannot be discarded. So for such requirements, customer always requires a large, scalable, lowest per terabyte cost kind of a storage environment to store that data. There are certain tools in the market like HPE Data Management Framework, DMF. It's a beautiful tool for creating a data tier and placing a data as per the set policies and tiering onto different types of storage nodes. So HPE DMF can understand that this data being a tier 2 or a tier 3, it can dynamically move it onto a lower tier for long-term archiving. And HPE DMF 7 has a direct integration with SUSE Enterprise Storage. Like DMF 7, which is HPE bound product, there is also iRods, which is completely open source data management tool, which also is fully integrated with SUSE Enterprise Storage. So using these two tools are already predominant in the HPC environment. Customers are already using them to tier and policy-based placement of their data. So if you have certain customers who are using this, SUSE Enterprise Storage becomes very easy fit in such environments. With our integration with these two DMF frameworks, customers can easily create and make the SUSE Enterprise Storage as part of their existing HPC environment. Now, we just discussed a couple of use cases, but the integrations that the SUSE Enterprise Storage has is endless. So if I try to show it to you in a single slide, it will be just collection of a lot of logos. So we have seen the backup to disk. We have seen the all leading proprietary backup softwares, as well as the new age open source backup softwares like Barrios. I'm sure some of you must have heard the name. It's one of the leading open source free to use backup software, which has its feature sets at par with any of the backup vendor which is there in the market. We have certain niche backup players like SEP, which are predominant only in European market. We have integrations with all of them, and this space is increasing. We have our integration with Eternity ICAS for compliance-related archives. We have our integrations with Lenovo and HP in terms of the high-performance computing-related storage environments. Apart from that, we have our certified reference architectures available for all server vendors. So when I talk about HP, when I talk about Dell, when I talk about Lenovo, Supermicro, Cisco, we have reference architectures which are available for all leading models of these server vendors. So these reference architecture give us a recommended configuration about if I'm trying to deploy, say, a HP Apollo 4500 server, what is the configuration I should look at? How should I be deploying it? What can be a best fit server for my management node or a gateway node? So all those details are available, are updated with every new version of servers, as well as SUSE Enterprise Storage. Maintaining the commodity server market as it is, we are also having certain integration with certain appliance vendors. So Thomas Crane and Embedded are predominant in the EMEA and the US market, not so much in the APJ yet. But with Thomas Crane and Embedded, SUSE Enterprise Storage is also created certain combination or a bundle where a SUSE Enterprise Storage and a hardware appliance from these two vendors are shipped out as a one single brick, which the customers can just power on, start using without having to get into any deployment steps or anything. So these are pre-configured systems which are rolling out in certain markets. When you talk about cloud or when you talk about the new age environments, OpenStack integrations we have already seen. We also have our integration of the CSI integration, containerized storage integration for persistent storage with SUSE Enterprise Storage. When you're talking about supporting something like an Hadoop environment or creating a data lake, SUSE Enterprise Storage can be the ideal candidate for it. For customers whose requirements are small but still want to experience the SUSE Enterprise Storage flexibility, we have our integration with certain CSPs in India who have already gone ahead and deployed a large instances of SUSE Enterprise Storage and using that capacity for storage as a service. So we can also help our end customers onboard onto such CSP programs, and they can start using SUSE Enterprise Storage as storage as a service. So the flexibility is endless. The amount of applications that you can address using SUSE Enterprise Storage are endless. And as the partners and our extended sales and pre-sales team, my humble request would be to go and try to address all possible opportunities that you can do with SUSE Enterprise Storage. For all technical help that you would need in terms of trying to validate the requirement, trying to help you with sizing, giving you recommendations in terms of how it needs to be implemented and what needs to be done, SUSE team is here to help you. So these are my coordinates. Feel free to reach out to me. Currently, I'm the Senior Solution Specialist for Storage for Asia Pacific, based out of Mumbai. And feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I would be happy to help you with any of your queries you have on SES or anywhere where you want me to help you with your customer's requirement. Thank you for listening. I think I'll now go ahead with the queries. If you have any questions, you have an option to raise the hand. I would unmute you one by one. Or if you have a question which you would want to key in, you can very well do that in the questions tab. So yeah, okay, one thing I missed. Okay, before we get into questions, I have couple of questions to just test how much of you were attentive and how many of us were busy onto social media. So let's look at the first question. Okay, so what type of storage requirements can be fulfilled using SUSE Enterprise Storage? Whether it is block only, file only, object only, or all of the above. Okay, I have 20% people who have voted. Okay, 10 more seconds. And I'll just close this question. So let's look at what were the responses. Okay, good. So thankfully, a large chunk of people have responded rightly or has given the correct answer that SUSE Enterprise Storage can address all of the above. So it can address block requirements, file requirements, as well as object store requirement. So all of the above would be the right answer. Now let's quickly look at the next question. And the second question is, what type of hardware is required to create an instance of SUSE Enterprise Storage for your end customer? Okay, I have 10% people voted. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I have 30% people who have voted. And 10 more seconds and I'll close the question. Okay, so let's look at the answers. Okay, so a large chunk has answered right. 50% of the people have answered that SUSE Enterprise Storage can be created on commodity server hardware. So that's the right answer, that you do not need a SAN storage. You do not need any specific hardware appliance. I know there are certain hardware appliances that the SUSE is trying to create for Europe and US market, but that's more of like a bundle rather than a mandatory requirement. So the correct answer would be any and every type of commodity server hardware. You can create a SUSE Enterprise Storage. And just as a note, we cannot include an existing SAN storage hardware or a new SAN storage hardware as a part of ceph storage, because SAN storage hardwares are proprietary in nature. They have their source code which is locked, so they cannot share their data access with something which is as open as ceph storage. That's the primary reason you cannot make a SAN storage part of your software-defined storage node. Okay, so half of the people is right. Just let me go to the last question. Yep, SUSE Enterprise Storage is licensed on, is on subscribed on. Okay, 20%, good. Okay, 30%. Interestingly, people are opting for all three options. So I'm worried I might have to repeat the session again so that everybody starts giving right answers. And sorry to say for you, you guys will have to sit again for it immediately for next 1 more hour. So let's look at the answers. So 59% people have voted that the subscription is based on number of nodes. That's the right answers. So SUSE Enterprise Storage does not limit you in terms of what is the capacity you can build, as long as your number of capacity nodes and management nodes are covered by your base license or a combination of base and expansion packs. So usable capacity, 18% have voted for it. That is not the right answer. We do not measure usable capacity. And 24% has voted for storage license as per features. Sorry, we do not do that. Enterprise storage companies are doing that and they are happy to continue with it. SUSE Enterprise Storage is unlimited feature, unlimited capacity, node-based license. So thank you for answering those. Now let me quickly look at the hands raised.
I'm Joel here.
Hey, hi Joel.
Yeah, Giridhar has put some few questions, so I think I'll unmute next to
I
him.
just he has his hand raised. I'm just going with Giridhar.
Yeah, hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Giridhar.
Anu.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, hi. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the session first. It was a great session actually. In fact, we were working with so many of the vendors for the software defined storage. Earlier, like we used to work with some of the vendors. Okay, I want to know, like, suppose if you have, yeah, as you said, the 4 number of nodes or minimum nodes. Okay, like, does every server also have OS? We need to have server individual OS also will be required.
Okay, thank you for raising that. Somewhere in the discussion, I missed out on mentioning it. So SUSE Enterprise Storage subscription license include your SUSE Linux licenses required for all these nodes. So when a SUSE Enterprise Storage base license includes license for 10 nodes, it also includes subscription required for SLES or SUSE Linux for those 10 nodes. So OS licenses bundled into it.
Okay. In case customer wants Windows or anything?
Currently, we cannot deploy ceph onto Windows right now. So the enterprise storage cannot be deployed on Windows.
Because when we made virtual storage on SGS, then they may go with any other OS also, no?
So yeah, so Giridhar, the logic is that we do not want the customer to invest anything beyond the hardware. We do not want the customer to even invest into an operating system license. Our expectation from the customer is just to give us bare metal server hardware. We would give you the required OS licenses onto it, as well as the ceph licenses, SUSE Enterprise licenses onto it. Now, this creating the storage. Now, when this storage is going to be utilized, there is no restriction on which OS can utilize it. So it can be a Windows host which can access this storage and read write data onto it. Now, just to let all the audience know, we are also pretty close to having our Windows native driver, which is going to become a GA. So what does it mean? That there would be a Windows component, like a Windows driver, which can be implemented as part of a Microsoft OS from Microsoft, which would natively connect ceph the way OpenStack has a native integration with ceph. So that is something you would see GA in next couple of months.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good actually. That's good actually.
Yes, sir. I do not see any more hands raised, but I see some questions here. I think most of them have been already answered by Joel.
Yeah, so I'm Joel here. Vivek has asked a question, if I'm not mistaken. He says, can you explain again the integration with backup software like Delta? So I wanted him to elaborate his question so that let us just unmute him so he can ask what exactly he's talking about. It's a very broad
Vivek, Vivek Khatode. Hi, Vivek.
Hi, sir.
I'm sorry, can you talk a bit louder?
So I just wanted to understand basically what functions does it support of the backup software? I mean, how does it integrate and helps the backup software like Microsoft backup or where it does backup? I just wanted to understand that.
Okay. So Vivek, your question is how does SUSE Enterprise Storage integrate with existing backup software? So SUSE Enterprise Storage integrates and acts only as a backup destination. So it's a D2D destination. So it is going to integrate with your, it's going to connect to your media server, and the backup master server is going to recognize it as a destination where I can save backup copies. So as part of the policies, any policies which are creating a data copy onto disk would create that backup copy onto SUSE Enterprise Storage. It will not be a normally plain simple readable format. It will be an encrypted format which only the backup master server and media server can understand. So instead of tape, the backup copies will be going on to SUSE Enterprise Storage. For that, you do not need any specific kind of an API or any kind of a command or integration to be done by the engineers. All that integration is already part of these 6 backup softwares. So when you go into their respective D2D sections and look at what are the supported storages that can be used as D2D, you would see SUSE Enterprise Storage listed there. So when the customer selects that, you do not need to do any further configuration beyond giving the directives of how to reach the SUSE Enterprise Storage instance. That's it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Thanks. One more question from Giridhar, and I think we can end. Okay, where is Giridhar? Yes, Giridhar.
Yeah, Anup,
Yeah.
okay, out of 4 nodes, if there is a 2 nodes down, then will it be there any redundancy path?
So, Giridhar, it depends upon how do you configure or how have you sized the storage. So this being based out on erasure coding, we can size or we can configure the storage where it can sustain up to 2 node failures. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So in the 4 nodes, you can configure it for a single node failure or a dual node failure. It's completely customizable. We can do that.
Oh, okay, okay. And if it is a DCDR replication, the same configuration is required both ends?
No, not required. So you just need to have a SUSE Enterprise Storage instance at both the ends, and both the instances can have their own size, their own hardware, their own separate vendors. So as long as they are SUSE Enterprise Storage, they can replicate between each other. For that matter, it can be any ceph version. So this being a open source, so between any ceph flavor, you can have a replication going on as DCDR.
Oh, okay, great, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being on the call. So I'm not seeing any more questions. In that case, I would go ahead and close this session. Thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being attentive. So if you have any further queries later on, feel free to reach out. My contact details are here. Yeah. Thank you.